The massive chamber stretched for kilometers in every direction, its crystal walls reflecting the light from 1,000 different suns. Ambassador Hyun-woo Kim stood at the small platform reserved for the human delegation, watching as representatives from 850 different species filled the vast space around him. The air hummed with translation devices working overtime to convert thousands of languages into something everyone could understand. Today was the day the Galactic Council would decide humanity's fate. Hyun-woo had served as Earth's primary ambassador for 12 years. He had seen the Council make decisions that affected billions of lives across the galaxy. He had watched species rise to prominence and others fade into obscurity. But he had never expected to stand here watching his own species face expulsion from the greatest alliance in galactic history. Beside him, Soo-Jin Park shuffled through her digital files one more time. As his chief aide, she had prepared every possible argument, every legal precedent, every diplomatic option. Her normally steady hands trembled slightly as she activated the holographic display showing Earth's contributions to the Council over the past century. The numbers were impressive by any measure. Humans had mediated 47 major conflicts, developed 32 breakthrough technologies that were now standard across Council space, and provided humanitarian aid to over 200 worlds. The charges against humanity were simple but damning. Earth had refused to stop developing independent military technology. The Council's Regulation 77B was clear about this matter. No member species could pursue advanced weapons research without explicit Council approval. The regulation existed to prevent arms races and maintain galactic stability. Every other species had agreed to these terms when they joined the alliance. Humans had argued that their research was purely defensive. They claimed they were developing new shield technologies and early warning systems to protect their colonies from raiders and natural disasters. The Council's military advisors had examined the human projects and declared them potentially dangerous. The technology could be adapted for offensive purposes with minimal modifications. Therefore, it violated the regulation. What the Council didn't know, and what Hyun-woo couldn't tell them, was the real reason behind humanity's research. 3 months ago, human deep space monitoring stations had detected something troubling at the edge of the galaxy. Energy signatures that didn't match any known phenomenon. Gravitational distortions that suggested massive objects moving through the void between galaxies. The human military scientists believed something was coming, something that current Council defenses couldn't handle. Hyun-woo had tried to share this information with the Council's Security Committee. They had dismissed his concerns as human paranoia. Several committee members suggested that humans were inventing threats to justify their illegal research. The Zephyrian representative had even accused Earth of spreading fear to maintain their relevance in Council affairs. Speaker Velthar of the Zephyrian Empire called the session to order. His towering form dominated the central podium, his 4 arms moving in ceremonial gestures as he spoke. The Zephyrians had led the Council for over 3 centuries, and Velthar himself had been speaker for 40 years. He was respected across the galaxy as a fair and wise leader, but he had never trusted humanity's independent streak. The formal reading of charges took an hour. Each accusation was presented with detailed evidence. Security footage showed human research facilities working on prohibited technologies. Communication intercepts revealed discussions about weapons development. Financial records proved that Earth had allocated significant resources to military projects without Council oversight. Hyun-woo listened to each charge without emotion. He had expected this day for months. The writing had been on the wall since the Council's last inspection of human research facilities. The inspectors had been shocked by the sophistication of human defensive systems. They had been even more disturbed by humanity's refusal to share the technology freely with all Council members. The truth was that humans had learned to be cautious about sharing their innovations. Too many times in the past, human technology had been copied, modified, and used against its creators. The Council's open technology policies looked good on paper, but they ignored the reality of galactic politics. Species that received advanced technology for free rarely felt grateful. They often felt entitled to even more. When the charges were complete, Velthar called for humanity's response. Hyun-woo walked slowly to the speaker's podium. The chamber fell silent as 850 species waited to hear Earth's defense. Translation devices hummed as they prepared to carry his words across the galaxy. Hyunwoo began by acknowledging the charges. Yes, humanity had continued military research without council approval. Yes, they had refused to stop when ordered. Yes, they had violated Regulation 77B. He made no excuses and offered no elaborate legal defenses. The facts were clear, and he saw no point in denying them. Instead, he spoke about humanity's contributions to the council. He reminded the assembly of the Carillion crisis, where human negotiators had prevented a war that could have consumed half the galaxy. He talked about the plague that had threatened the Altarian colonies and how human medical researchers had developed a cure in record time. He mentioned the Space Highway project that connected the Outer Rim worlds, a massive undertaking that human engineers had completed ahead of schedule and under budget. But as Hyunwoo spoke, he could see that his words were falling on deaf ears. The council had already made its decision. The vote was a formality, a way to make the expulsion seem legitimate and fair. The real discussions had happened in private meetings over the past weeks. Deals had been made, favors traded, and alliances formed. Humanity's fate had been sealed before the session even began. The voting process took 3 hours. Each species announced their decision in order of seniority within the council. The Zephyrians voted first, their yes vote carrying the weight of 3 centuries of leadership. The Altarians followed with their own yes, despite the fact that human medical research had saved millions of their people. One by one, species that had benefited from human assistance voted to expel Earth from the Alliance. Only 3 species abstained from the vote. The Carillions, who owed their continued existence to human diplomacy, couldn't bring themselves to vote against Earth, but lacked the courage to vote in humanity's favor. The small Deltarian Republic abstained because they feared economic retaliation from the major powers. The third abstention came from a species so minor that most council members couldn't remember their name. As the final votes were tallied, Soo-jin whispered urgently in Hyunwoo's ear. She had prepared an appeal based on procedural violations. The council had failed to give humanity adequate time to respond to the charges. They had refused to hear testimony from species that had benefited from human assistance. The voting process itself had been rushed and potentially invalid. Hyunwoo listened to her arguments and shook his head. An appeal would only delay the inevitable. The council wanted humanity gone, and they would find a way to make it happen regardless of legal technicalities. Fighting the decision would only make Earth look desperate and vindictive. Better to leave with dignity intact. When Speaker Velthar announced the final vote count, the chamber erupted in a mixture of relief and unease. 847 votes for expulsion, 3 abstentions, 0 votes in favor of humanity. The decision was unanimous by any reasonable measure. Earth was officially expelled from the Galactic Council, effective immediately. Hyunwoo stood and gathered his papers calmly. Soo-jin continued to argue for an appeal, but he silenced her with a gentle gesture. He had one more thing to say to the council, and he wanted his final words to be memorable. Walking back to the speaker's podium, Hyunwoo looked out over the vast assembly. 850 species from across the galaxy, representing trillions of sentient beings all united in their decision to cast out humanity. He felt no anger, only a deep sadness for what might have been. His final statement was brief and formal. He thanked the council for the opportunity to serve alongside them for over a century. He acknowledged their right to make decisions about council membership. He accepted their judgment without protest or complaint, and then he said the words that would haunt the galaxy for years to come. Humanity withdraws from all galactic affairs. Effective immediately. We wish you well in your future endeavors. No threats of revenge, no promises to return, no dramatic declarations about humanity's wounded pride. Just a simple statement of withdrawal that somehow felt more ominous than any angry speech could have been. Hyunwoo bowed formally to the assembly as human custom required when leaving a formal gathering. Soo-jin followed his lead, though tears were visible in her eyes. Together, they walked from the chamber in complete silence, their footsteps echoing in the vast space as 850 species watched them go. Within hours, every human ship in council space began receiving the same message. Return to Earth immediately. All diplomatic missions were terminated. All trade agreements were void. All research partnerships were dissolved. Humanity was leaving the galactic community. As quietly and efficiently as they had it, the evacuation of human facilities across the galaxy began within hours of the Council's decision. There were no dramatic protests or angry demonstrations. Human administrators simply announced that all operations would cease within 72 hours. Workers began packing equipment with the same methodical efficiency they had shown in everything else they did. Dr. Min-Ho Lee stood in his laboratory on Kepler 442b, watching his research team dismantle equipment they had spent 5 years perfecting. The xenobiology lab had been studying symbiotic relationships between different species, work that had already led to breakthrough medical treatments for 3 different council races. His Altarian colleagues stood nearby, looking confused and worried, as human technicians carefully packed sensitive instruments. Min-Ho had devoted his life to understanding how different species could work together for mutual benefit. His research had shown that cooperation between diverse biological systems often produced results that neither could achieve alone. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on him. The Council was rejecting the very cooperation that his work had proven essential for survival and growth. The Altarian team leader, a tall being with translucent skin and multiple sensory organs, approached Min-Ho as the packing continued. The Altarian spoke through a translation device, its mechanical voice unable to convey the emotion visible in the alien's posture. It wanted to know if the research could continue without human participation. Could Min-Ho leave copies of his data and research protocols? Min-Ho considered the request carefully. His work belonged to Earth now, not to the Council, but the potential benefits to galactic medicine were enormous. After a long moment, he activated his personal computer and began transferring files. 5 years of research data, experimental protocols, and theoretical frameworks flowed into the lab's main database. It was his gift to species he might never see again. As the data transfer completed, Min-Ho removed a small device from his pocket. It contained his most recent discoveries, research that wouldn't be completed for another 2 years. Without this data, the Altarians would struggle to continue the work. With it, they might achieve breakthroughs that could save millions of lives. He handed the device to his colleague and walked away without explanation. Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out at hundreds of human facilities. On the industrial world of Vega Prime, Wan-Sik Chen was shutting down the sector's largest trade coordination center. The facility managed supply chains that connected over 200 worlds, ensuring that raw materials reached factories and finished goods reached markets efficiently. Wan-Sik had been running these operations for 8 years, personally handling disputes and negotiations that kept trade flowing smoothly. His replacement was already standing by, a sophisticated Centaurian artificial intelligence that the Council considered far superior to human management. The AI had been programmed with detailed knowledge of galactic trade regulations, market, dynamics, and logistical optimization. What the AI lacked was Wan-Sik's intuitive understanding of the cultural and political factors that really drove galactic commerce. It knew that Species A produced mineral X, and Species B needed that mineral for their manufacturing. But it didn't understand that Species A would only trade with Species B if the negotiations were conducted through intermediaries from Species C, and only if the contract signing ceremony included specific ritual elements that showed respect for ancient cultural traditions. Wan-Sik tried to explain these nuances during the transition briefing, but the AI's programmers dismissed them as inefficient human complications. Their system would streamline the process by removing unnecessary cultural elements and focusing purely on economic optimization. Wan-Sik shrugged and finished his preparations for departure. The AI would learn these lessons the hard way. The most visible sign of humanity's departure was the evacuation of deep space rescue operations. Captain Da-Yun Choi commanded the rescue vessel Harmony, one of 12 human ships that provided emergency response services throughout Council space. Her crew had saved over 3,000 lives in the past decade, including some of the most dramatic rescues in galactic history. The Harmony was currently responding to a distress call from a damaged freighter near the Nexus station. The ship's cargo hold had been breached by debris from an asteroid mining operation, and the crew was trapped in a rapidly depressurizing compartment. Standard Council rescue protocols would take 6 hours to mount a response. The trapped crew had maybe 2 hours of air remaining. Dahyun's team reached the freighter in 90 minutes. They used cutting-edge human rescue technology to create a temporary atmospheric seal around the damaged area, then carefully extracted the crew one by one. The operation was completed with minutes to spare, another routine miracle performed by humans who refused to accept that some situations were hopeless. As the rescued crew members were transferred to safety, Da-un received an urgent message from Earth. All human vessels were to return to Sol System immediately. No exceptions. No delays. The Harmony was to complete its current mission and then head home without accepting any new rescue calls. The rescued freighter captain, a gruff Carillion trader, asked Da-un why the humans were leaving. She explained the council's decision, as simply as possible. The Carillion listened in silence, then asked what would happen to stranded ships once the human rescue services were gone. Da-un had no answer for that question. Similar conversations were happening across the galaxy as human personnel explained their sudden departure to confused colleagues and partners. Most of the explanations were met with disbelief. How could the Council expel humanity over something as minor as weapons research? Surely there had been some mistake that could be corrected through proper diplomatic channels. The humans offered no criticism of the Council's decision. They expressed no anger or resentment about their treatment. They simply stated that Earth was withdrawing from galactic affairs and wished everyone well. This calm acceptance somehow made their departure more unsettling than angry protests would have been. On the research station orbiting Proxima Centauri, Dr. Yoon-suk Kim was preparing to abandon work that had consumed her life for the past 6 years. She had been developing new methods for stabilizing quantum tunnels, the technology that made faster-than-light communication possible across galactic distances. Her research was 90% complete, with practical applications that could revolutionize long-distance communication. The station's other researchers begged her to stay and finish the work. The potential benefits were too important to abandon over political disputes. Dr. Kim explained that she had no choice in the matter. Earth's government had ordered all citizens to return home immediately. Personal preferences were irrelevant, say. She packed her research materials. Dr. Kim made careful notes about the work's current status. She couldn't leave the actual data behind, but she could provide enough information for other researchers to continue the project. It would take them years to reach the same level of understanding, assuming they could solve the theoretical problems that had taken her so long to work through. The quantum stabilization research exemplified humanity's approach to galactic science. Where other species focused on perfecting existing technologies, humans looked for entirely new approaches to old problems. They were willing to pursue ideas that seemed impossible, often finding solutions that more cautious researchers would never attempt. This willingness to take risks and challenge conventional thinking had made humans valuable partners in countless research projects. They brought fresh perspectives to problems that had stalled for decades. Their departure would leave significant gaps in ongoing research across dozens of scientific disciplines. The evacuation of human colonies was perhaps the most visible sign of their complete withdrawal from galactic society. These settlements had been established over the course of a century, representing humanity's gradual expansion beyond their home system. Some colonies housed millions of people, while others were small research outposts with just a few dozen inhabitants. All of them were abandoned within 6 months of the Council's decision. The evacuation was carried out with typical human efficiency, but the scale of the operation was staggering. Entire cities were dismantled and shipped back to Earth. Industrial facilities that had taken decades to build were carefully disassembled and transported across hundreds of light years. The abandoned worlds were left in pristine condition, with all human structures removed and the local environment restored to its natural state. It was as if humanity had never been there at all, except for the carefully maintained infrastructure that other species quickly moved to claim. The Council initially viewed the human exodus as a minor inconvenience that would quickly be forgotten. Humans had never been the most advanced species or the most powerful military force. Their departure would create temporary disruptions, but other species could easily fill the gaps they left behind. This confidence lasted exactly 3 weeks after the final human ship departed Council space. That was when the first major systems failure occurred at the Vega Prime Trade Center. The Centaurian AI that had replaced Wansik Chen crashed while trying to process a 3-way trade dispute. Between the Zephyrians, 2 years after the human exodus, the galaxy was falling apart in ways that no one had predicted. The problems started small and seemingly unrelated, but they grew worse with each passing month. What had begun as minor inconveniences had evolved into major crises that threatened the stability of the entire galactic civilization. The Vorthan-Kalari trade war erupted over shipping routes that had been managed peacefully for over 30 years. The conflict began with a simple dispute about transportation fees through a neutral star system. Under normal circumstances, the disagreement would have been resolved through standard diplomatic channels within a few days. Trade mediator Byung-Ho Nam had prevented this exact same conflict 17 times during his tenure with the Council. He understood both species well enough to craft compromises that satisfied their economic needs while respecting their cultural pride. The Vorthans were intensely territorial, but could be persuaded to share resources if they received proper recognition of their sovereignty. The Kalari were profit-focused, but would accept reduced margins if they gained long-term trading advantages. The new mediator assigned to the case was a highly trained Zephyrian diplomat with decades of experience in interspecies negotiations. She understood the technical aspects of the dispute perfectly and had access to detailed records of previous settlements. But she lacked the intuitive understanding of both cultures that Byung-Ho had developed through years of patient interaction. The Zephyrian mediator proposed a solution that was mathematically fair and legally sound. The shipping routes would be divided equally between both species, with costs and profits shared according to a complex formula that took into account each group's contribution to route maintenance. On paper, the proposal was brilliant. In practice, it was a disaster. The Vorthans saw the equal division as an insult to their historical claims to the territory. The Kalari viewed the shared profit arrangement as an attempt to limit their earning potential. Both species rejected the proposal and began taking unilateral action to secure their interests. Within weeks, Vorthan patrol ships were harassing Kalari freighters. The Kalari responded by organizing economic boycotts of Vorthan goods. Trade through the disputed routes fell by 60% as merchants sought safer alternatives. The economic disruption spread to dozens of other worlds that depended on the regular flow of goods through the region. The Council's emergency mediation team tried to resolve the crisis using established protocols. They organized formal hearings where both sides could present their grievances. They reviewed decades of legal precedents and trade agreements. They consulted experts on Vorthan and Kalari culture and history. Nothing worked. Every proposed solution created new problems or violated principles that one side considered non-negotiable. The mediation sessions themselves became battlegrounds where ancient grievances were aired and new insults were exchanged. What had started as a commercial dispute was becoming a full-scale diplomatic breakdown between two major trading powers. Meanwhile, the Andromeda Gate was experiencing critical failures that threatened to cut off communication with an entire spiral arm of the galaxy. The massive quantum tunnel that enabled instant communication across 50,000 light-years had been operating flawlessly for over 2 centuries. Dr. Yoon-Suk Kim's research had been essential to maintaining its stability during recent upgrades. The Joint Zephyrian-Altarian team assigned to maintain the gate had her complete research files and access to the most advanced quantum physics expertise in the galaxy. They should have been able to handle routine maintenance and minor adjustments without difficulty. Instead, they discovered that Dr. Kim's supposedly simple calculations contained intuitive leaps that their most sophisticated computer models couldn't reproduce. Her work appeared straightforward on the surface. She had developed mathematical formulas that described quantum field interactions in terms that any advanced physicist could understand. But the practical application of these formulas required constant micro-adjustments based on factors that she had never fully explained in her documentation. The maintenance team tried to replicate her methodology using purely theoretical approaches. They ran thousands of computer simulations and consulted with the galaxy's leading experts on quantum mechanics. Their calculations indicated that the gate should be operating perfectly. In reality, quantum stability was declining by 2% each month. The team's attempts to compensate for the deterioration only made things worse. Each adjustment created unexpected resonance effects that destabilized other parts of the system. Within 6 months, communication delays through the gate had increased from nanoseconds to several minutes. long-distance coordination between Council worlds became increasingly difficult as real-time communication became impossible. The military situation was deteriorating even faster than civilian systems. Admiral Jae-sung Ryu had developed tactical frameworks that kept interdimensional threats, known as Void Reapers, at bay for over a decade. These entities emerged from tiers in space-time itself, consuming matter and energy before disappearing back into their own dimension. The Void Reapers had been a manageable threat under Ryu's leadership. His strategies relied on rapid response, teams that could adapt quickly to each entity's unique characteristics. No two Void Reapers were exactly alike, so standard military protocols were useless against them. Success required creative thinking and the ability to develop new tactics in real time during combat. The Council's military commanders had studied Ryu's methods extensively. They had detailed records of every engagement and access to all his strategic analyses. They understood his theoretical framework perfectly and had trained their forces according to his doctrines, but they couldn't replicate the intuitive decision-making that made his strategies effective. When Void Reapers began appearing with increasing frequency, the Council's forces struggled to contain them. The creatures seemed to sense that something had changed in the galaxy's defenses. They stayed longer in normal space and showed less fear of Council military responses. Several minor worlds were completely stripped of their energy resources before relief forces could arrive. The archaeological preservation crisis was perhaps the most heartbreaking of all the developing problems. Young Mi-Oh had been cataloging ancient ruins across the galaxy that might contain keys to advanced technologies, including faster-than-light communication methods that could work without quantum tunnels. Her project had been 73% complete when she was forced to abandon it. The work represented 15 years of careful exploration and analysis, with discoveries that could revolutionize galactic civilization. Some of the ruins she had studied were older than any known civilization, suggesting that advanced species had existed in the galaxy millions of years before current inhabitants arrived. The team assigned to continue her work consisted of the galaxy's most respected archaeologists and xenocultural experts. They had access to all her field notes, photographic records, and preliminary analyses. They should have been able to pick up where she left off without significant delays. Instead, the project collapsed within months. The team members couldn't agree on basic methodology or research priorities. Each species wanted to focus on ruins that might reveal information about their own ancient history. Territorial disputes erupted as different groups claimed exclusive rights to study particular sites. Young Mi had somehow managed to keep dozens of competing researchers working toward common goals. She had mediated between species with conflicting interests and cultural taboos. Most importantly, she had maintained a big-picture perspective that prevented the project from fragmenting into isolated studies of individual ruins. Without her unifying presence, the archaeological project devolved into academic warfare. Research. Teams began hoarding discoveries instead of sharing them with colleagues. Several important sites were damaged by careless excavation as teams rushed to claim credit for major finds. The potential for revolutionary discoveries was being sacrificed to petty academic politics. The Council's emergency sessions to address these mounting crises lasted for weeks at a time. Speaker Velthar found himself mediating disputes that should have been resolved at much lower levels of government. Every solution they proposed seemed to create 3 new problems. The administrative burden was becoming overwhelming as more and more issues required direct intervention from the highest levels of galactic leadership. The pattern was becoming clear to anyone willing to see it. Humans hadn't just been useful members of the galactic community. They had been essential infrastructure, quietly holding together systems that other species hadn't even realized existed. Their departure had removed a critical component from galactic civilization, and the resulting cascade failures were accelerating. The economic disruptions caused by the Vorthan-Kalari trade war spread to over 50 worlds. The communication delays from the Andromeda Gate's deterioration affected coordination across an entire spiral arm. The increasing Void Reaper attacks threatened frontier colonies throughout the Outer Rim. The collapse of archaeological research meant that potential solutions to these problems might remain buried forever. 3 years after humanity's departure, panic had begun to set in among the Council's leadership. The cascade of failures across galactic civilization showed no signs of slowing down. If anything, the problems were accelerating as critical systems that had depended on human maintenance began reaching total breakdown points. Speaker Vel Thar authorized the largest search operation in galactic history to locate humanity and determine their current status. Captain Juan Torres commanded the reconnaissance vessel, Deep Explorer, one of 50 ships assigned to search the galactic rim for any trace of human activity. Her orders were simple but urgent. Find out where humanity had gone and what they were doing in their self-imposed exile. The Council needed to know if there was any possibility of negotiating their return to help address the mounting crises. Juan's ship was equipped with the most advanced sensor technology available to the Council. Her crew included specialists from a dozen different species, each bringing unique perspectives on tracking and analysis. They had been searching for 6 months without finding anything more substantial than automated messages left behind at abandoned human facilities. The messages were identical at every location. Humanity thanks the Council for the opportunity to serve alongside you for over a century. We wish you well in your future endeavors. Please do not attempt to follow us beyond the galactic rim. For your own safety, maintain a minimum distance of 100 light-years from the edge of Council space. The warnings about safety were particularly troubling. Humans had never been known for paranoia or unnecessary caution. If they were advising other species to stay away from certain regions, there was probably a very good reason. But the Council's leadership had overruled these concerns and ordered the search teams to proceed regardless of potential risks. The breakthrough came when Juan's sensor operator detected faint quantum signatures near an apparently empty star system at the galaxy's edge. The readings were almost too weak to measure, but they showed patterns consistent with advanced human technology. More importantly, they seemed to be moving in ways that suggested artificial intelligence or automated systems. Following the quantum trail required pushing their ship's engines far beyond normal operational limits. The signatures led away from the galaxy itself, out into the vast emptiness between galactic clusters. No known civilization had ever ventured so far from home. The energy requirements alone should have made such a journey impossible with current technology. After 2 weeks of pursuit, Juan's team finally found something that defied every assumption they had made about human capabilities. Floating in the void between galaxies was a construction project of staggering scope and complexity. Massive structures stretched for hundreds of kilometers in every direction, their purpose unclear, but their technological sophistication undeniable. The constructions appeared to be some kind of defensive installations, but they incorporated design, principles that no Council species had ever developed. They seemed to bend space-time itself, creating gravitational effects that shouldn't have been possible with known physics. Energy signatures indicated power sources that generated more output than most stellar cores. As the Deep Explorer approached for a closer inspection, they detected human ships moving between the installations, but these vessels bore little resemblance to the technology humanity had possessed when they left Council space. They were larger, faster, and equipped with systems that seemed to operate according to entirely different physical principles. Juan attempted to establish communication with the human vessels, but received no response to standard Council hailing frequencies. Her communications officer suggested that humanity might have developed new technologies that made their old equipment obsolete. They might not even be monitoring the radio frequencies that galactic civilizations still used for basic communication. The search team spent 3 days documenting the mysterious installations before detecting something even more disturbing. The structures weren't just defensive in nature. They were clearly designed to contain or repel something massive, something that was expected to arrive from the direction of deep intergalactic space. The implications were terrifying to consider. Analysis of the construction patterns suggested that humanity had been building these installations for at least 2 years. The project had begun almost immediately after their departure from Council space. This meant that whatever threat they were preparing for had been known to them before their expulsion from the Galactic Alliance. Juan's team also discovered evidence of non-human technologies integrated into the installations. The construction incorporated design elements from dozens of species that the Council had never encountered. Humanity appeared to have made contact with civilizations from other galaxies, forming alliances that made their old council membership seem insignificant by comparison. The search continued for another month, revealing the true scope of humanity's activities in exile. They had established a network of defensive installations that stretched across thousands of light-years of intergalactic space. They had developed technologies that surpassed anything in council space by centuries. Most importantly, they had formed alliances with extragalactic civilizations that possessed knowledge and capabilities beyond current understanding. Encrypted fragments of human communications were eventually intercepted by the deep explorers' most sensitive listening equipment. The messages spoke of something called the Convergence, a cosmic event that would make the Void Reaper incursions seem like minor nuisances. The language used in these communications suggested an existential threat to all life in the galaxy. Dr. Na Young Seo's research files, discovered in an abandoned human observation post, contained mathematical proofs that were deeply disturbing. Her work suggested that the galaxy's spiral structure was inherently unstable at certain frequencies. Something was approaching that would resonate with these frequencies, potentially tearing apart the gravitational bonds that held the galaxy together. The mathematical models were beyond the understanding of most council scientists, but their implications were clear enough. The galaxy itself was in danger of complete dissolution if the approaching threat wasn't contained. Humanity's illegal military research had been an attempt to develop defenses against a cosmic disaster that would destroy everything. The most chilling discovery came from personal files belonging to Dong-Wook Park, former head of humanity's deep space monitoring network. His records showed 17 separate attempts to warn the Council about the approaching threat. Each warning had been more urgent than the last, describing energy readings and gravitational anomalies that suggested something enormous moving. Through intergalactic space, every single warning had been dismissed by the Council's leadership. Some had been ignored completely. Others had been classified as human fear-mongering or attempts to maintain relevance within the Alliance. The Council's scientific advisors had declared the evidence insufficient and the conclusions speculative. Dong-Wook's final entry was particularly haunting. "We have tried everything. The Council refuses to listen to our warnings or examine our evidence. They seem to believe that dismissing the threat will make it disappear. We have no choice but to prepare our own defenses and hope we can protect the galaxy despite their unwillingness to help." Haewon's final transmission before her ship vanished beyond the galactic rim contained information that would haunt the Council's leadership for years to come. Her team had detected massive objects moving through intergalactic space, objects that matched the energy signatures humanity had been tracking for years. The convergence was real, and it was approaching faster than anyone had predicted. The transmission cut off abruptly as the Deep Explorer passed beyond the range of Council communication networks. No further contact was ever established with Haewon's team. They had ventured too far into the void, following humanity into regions where Council technology couldn't function. The information brought back by the search teams painted a picture that the Council's leadership found almost impossible to accept. Humanity hadn't been developing weapons for aggressive purposes. They had been trying to save the galaxy from a threat that conventional understanding couldn't even recognize. Their expulsion had forced them to seek help elsewhere, building alliances that made their old council membership irrelevant. The search results also revealed the true scope of humanity's transformation during their exile. They had evolved far beyond their former capabilities, developing technologies that incorporated knowledge from multiple galactic civilizations. They had become exactly what the Council had feared: too powerful, too advanced, too independent. But they had also become what the galaxy needed: protectors capable of facing cosmic threats. Intelligence analysis of the intercepted communications suggested that humanity's new alliances extended far beyond simple technology sharing. They had become part of an intergalactic community dedicated to protecting younger civilizations from cosmic disasters. The Council's galaxy was just one of many that required protection from the forces of entropy and dissolution. The convergence began exactly as human predictions had indicated. Reality tears opened along the galactic spiral arms, releasing entities that made the Void Reapers look like harmless insects. These new threats didn't just consume matter and energy like their smaller cousins. They devoured the fundamental forces that held space and time together, leaving behind regions where the basic laws of physics no longer applied. The first major breach occurred near the Outer Rim territories, where early warning systems detected gravitational anomalies that shouldn't have been possible. Space itself began unraveling in a sphere that expanded at nearly the speed of light. 3-star systems simply ceased to exist, not destroyed but erased from reality as if they had never been there at all. The Council's military response was swift but utterly inadequate. Admiral Kesvar of the Zephyrian fleet led 200 ships in an attempt to contain the breach using conventional weapons and energy shields. The fleet approached in perfect formation, their weapons charged, and shields at maximum strength. They maintained communication until the moment they crossed into the affected region. Then silence. The ships didn't explode or get destroyed in any recognizable way. They simply stopped existing. The quantum signatures that marked their presence in normal space vanished completely. 200 vessels and their crews had been erased from reality as thoroughly as if they had never been built. The second breach opened near a major trade hub in the galactic core, threatening over 50 inhabited worlds with billions of sentient beings. Evacuation efforts began immediately, but the logistics were overwhelming. The Council's transportation network, already strained by years of cascade failures since humanity's departure, couldn't handle refugee movements on such a massive scale. Panic spread across Council space as the true nature of the threat became apparent. This wasn't an invasion that could be fought with conventional tactics. This was cosmic dissolution that rendered normal military responses meaningless. The entities emerging from the reality tiers existed in dimensions where matter and energy were just temporary inconveniences to be swept aside. Speaker Velthar convened emergency sessions that ran continuously as the crisis escalated. Every solution proposed by the Council's best minds proved useless against threats that operated outside the boundaries of known physics. The quantum stabilization technology that Dr. Yoon-Suk Kim had been developing might have provided answers, but her research remained incomplete and her insights had died with humanity's departure. The third breach was the largest yet, opening in a region where several major shipping lanes converged. The expanding zone of dissolution threatened to cut the galaxy in half, isolating entire spiral arms from each other. Communication networks that had taken centuries to build were severed. As the fundamental structure of space-time collapsed, that was when salvation arrived from the deep void. Sensors detected massive ships approaching from intergalactic space, vessels that incorporated design principles that seemed to bend reality around them. The lead ship broadcast a message on frequencies that shouldn't have been able to penetrate. The reality distortions. This is Admiral Sung-Ho Lee of the Human Defense Coalition. We are moving to engage the convergence entities. All Council vessels should withdraw to minimum safe distance and prepare to coordinate evacuation efforts. The human fleet that emerged from the void bore no resemblance to the ships that had departed Council space 4 years earlier. These vessels seemed to exist partially outside normal space-time, their hulls shimmering with energies that human science hadn't possessed when they left. They moved with impossible grace through regions where reality itself was unstable. Leading the fleet was the flagship Harmony's Legacy, named after Captain Dae-Yoon Choi's old rescue vessel. The ship appeared to be constructed from materials that didn't exist in the periodic table, held together by forces that made conventional physics seem quaint. Its very presence seemed to stabilize the local space-time continuum. Admiral Sung-Ho Lee had been Speaker Velthar's junior aide when humanity was expelled from the Council. Now, he commanded technologies that incorporated knowledge from dozens of extragalactic civilizations. His ship alone possessed more firepower than the entire Council fleet, but it was firepower designed to operate in the strange physics of interdimensional warfare. The human ships engaged the convergence entities using weapons that seemed to rewrite reality at the quantum level. They fired projectiles that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, creating cascade effects that forced the entities back into their own realm. Energy beams that looked like controlled tears in space-time carved through threats that conventional weapons couldn't even touch. Dr. Jin A. Kim established field hospitals using medical techniques that incorporated healing principles from civilizations that existed in parallel dimensions. Her treatments worked on species that human medicine had never encountered, using knowledge that bridged the gap between different forms of consciousness and existence. Engineer Woojin Cho led teams that repaired damage to space-time itself using hybrid technologies that shouldn't have been possible. His crews worked in regions where causality operated backwards and effect preceded cause. They rebuilt the fundamental structure of reality using tools that existed partially outside the universe. The humans fought with desperate efficiency, but they didn't fight alone. Ships from dozens of extragalactic civilizations joined the battle, species that the Council had never imagined could exist. The human fleet had become the coordination center for an alliance that spanned multiple galaxies and dimensions. Each allied species brought unique capabilities to the fight. The crystalline entities from Andromeda could phase through solid matter to attack the convergence beings from within. The energy-based life forms from the Magellanic Clouds could interface directly with the reality distortions and stabilize them from inside. But it was the humans who somehow made all these diverse capabilities work together. They translated between forms of consciousness that had no common reference points. They coordinated tactics between species that existed in different numbers of dimensions. They found ways to combine technologies that should have been incompatible. The battle raged across multiple realities simultaneously as the human coalition fought to seal the reality breaches before they could expand further. The fighting was unlike anything that had ever been witnessed in the galaxy's history. Entire star systems served as battlegrounds where the fundamental laws of physics were constantly rewritten. The final confrontation took place at the galaxy's core, where the largest convergence entity was attempting to destabilize the central black hole. If it succeeded, the resulting gravitational collapse would tear apart every star system in the galaxy within a matter of hours. The entity was larger than most solar systems and existed in dimensions that made it nearly impossible to attack. Changmin Li, grandson of the original ambassador who had been expelled from the Council, led the final assault in a ship that seemed to exist in all dimensions simultaneously. His vessel passed through the entity's defenses as if they weren't there, striking at weak points that only humans seemed able to perceive. The battle's climax came when Changmin's ship merged temporarily with the convergence entity, fighting it from within using weapons that operated on the level of pure consciousness. The struggle took place in realms where thought and reality were indistinguishable, where willpower could reshape the fundamental constants of existence. Victory came at enormous cost. The convergence entities were forced back into their own dimension, but the effort required sacrificing technologies that had taken centuries to develop. Several human ships were lost completely, erased from all possible realities to prevent the entities from using their technology against other dimensions. When the fighting ended, the galaxy was safe but forever changed. The reality breaches had been sealed. But the scars they left would be permanent reminders of how close civilization had come to complete dissolution. Entire regions of space-time would remain unstable for millennia to come. Speaker Velthar's formal apology was broadcast across all surviving worlds. His words carried the weight of genuine remorse as he acknowledged the magnitude of the Council's error. We cast out our greatest allies in fear of their strength, never realizing that strength was meant to protect us all. We dismissed their warnings because we couldn't comprehend the threats they had detected. Our arrogance nearly cost us everything. Changmin's response was delivered from the bridge of his battle-scarred flagship, surrounded by representatives from the extragalactic alliance that humanity had built. His words echoed his grandfather's dignity while reflecting the wisdom that humanity had gained through their trials. Humanity holds no grudges against the Council or its member species. We never left to punish you for your decision. We left to become what you needed us to be, even if you couldn't recognize that need at the time. The galaxy is our home, and we will always protect it regardless of political arrangements. The humans didn't seek to rejoin the Council or demand apologies for their treatment. Instead, they established the Galactic Coordination Network, a new alliance based on cooperation rather than control.